My sister mocked my deaf daughter at Christmas dinner. My dad laughed, so I projected the video on the living room TV. The room went silent except for Teresa's cruel voice coming through the speakers, mimicking Clara's attempts at speech while my father doubled over laughing in the background. I watched my sister's face drain of color as every person in that room, her husband, her in-laws, our mother, our extended family, turned to stare at her with expressions of horror and disgust. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my daughter, who had been playing with her cousins in the next room, completely unaware of what had just transpired, and walked out the front door. The weight of Clara's small body against my shoulder as I carried her to the car felt both heavy and impossibly light, heavy with the knowledge of what had been said about her, light with the satisfaction of knowing I had just detonated a bomb in the middle of Teresa's carefully curated perfect life. Through the picture window, I could see chaos erupting inside. My mother had her hand over her mouth. My sister was gesturing wildly, and Carlos was pulling out his phone with an expression that suggested he was already calculating damage control. Let them scramble. Let Teresa try to explain away what everyone had just witnessed with their own eyes and ears. Some things cannot be unsaid, cannot be explained away, cannot be forgiven. I am a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm in Portland, Oregon. I make a decent living. Not wealthy by any means, but comfortable enough to provide for Clara and myself since her father walked out when she was diagnosed at 18 months old. He couldn't handle having a defective daughter, as he so charmingly put it before signing away his parental rights. Good riddance. Clara and I have built a beautiful life together, just the two of us. She attends an excellent deaf school where she thrives, has friends, loves art class, and communicates fluently in American Sign Language. She is smart, funny, creative, and completely whole exactly as she is. The world's failure to accommodate her is not her problem. It's the world's problem. I have spent 7 years making sure she knows that, building her confidence, celebrating every milestone, teaching her that her deafness is simply part of who she is, not something to be ashamed of or fixed. Teresa, my older sister by 3 years, took a different path. She married Carlos Mendez, a financial consultant who makes impressive money, bought a house in the West Hills with a view of Mount Hood, and built a career as a successful real estate agent catering to Portland's wealthy elite. She posts constantly on social media about her perfect life, her designer clothes, her expensive vacations, her charity work. Teresa has always needed to be the best at everything, the center of attention, the golden child. When we were growing up, she was the one who got straight A's while I struggled with dyslexia. She was the cheerleader captain while I played in the band. She was prom queen while I spent prom night working at the movie theater to save money for college. Our parents, particularly our father, always made it clear who their favorite was. Teresa could do no wrong. I was the disappointment, the one who had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. That dynamic shifted somewhat when Clara was born. Suddenly, I had something Teresa didn't: a child. She and Carlos have been trying for years without success, undergoing multiple rounds of fertility treatments that have failed. I never gloated about this. If anything, I felt genuine sympathy for her struggle. But Teresa doesn't handle not getting what she wants very well. And over time, her comments about Clara became increasingly pointed. Little digs about how difficult it must be to raise a deaf child. Suggestions that I should have done more research during pregnancy to prevent it. Questions about whether Clara would ever be normal. I deflected these comments, set boundaries, tried to educate her. But Teresa has never been good at listening to anyone she considers beneath her, and in her mind, I will always be the screw-up little sister. 6 months ago, I installed a security camera system in our parents' house. I told them it was for their safety. They're getting older, living alone in Beaverton, and I worried about break-ins. The real reason was more complex. I had started noticing that Clara would come home from visits to their house seeming withdrawn, less enthusiastic about seeing her grandparents. When I asked her what was wrong, she would just sign that she was tired. But I knew my daughter, and something was off. The cameras were insurance, a way to verify my suspicions if needed. I never expected to capture what I did on Christmas Day. We arrived at my parents' house around 2 in the afternoon on December 25th. The plan was dinner at 4, followed by presents and games. Clara was excited. She had made ornaments for everyone in her art class and couldn't wait to give them out. My mother answered the door with a warm hug, signing a cheerful Merry Christmas to Clara. My mother had learned ASL when Clara was diagnosed and was the only member of my extended family besides me who could communicate with her fluently. Even my father had learned only the bare minimum: Hello, thank you, I love you. And that was under significant pressure from my mother and me. Teresa and Carlos arrived 30 minutes later with an enormous stack of professionally wrapped gifts and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. She air-kissed my cheeks, complimented Clara's dress with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and immediately began holding court about her latest luxury listing, a waterfront property in Lake Oswego that was going for $3.2 million. My father hung on her every word, asking questions about the buyers, the commission, the marketing strategy. When I tried to share that Clara had won an art contest at school, he nodded distractedly and turned back to Teresa's real estate stories. Dinner was the usual affair: turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, the works. My mother had outdone herself as always. Clara sat between my mother and me, using her fork with careful precision and occasionally signing to ask questions about the food. She was being so good, so well-behaved, completely engaged with the family despite not being able to participate in the verbal conversations swirling around her. I interpreted for her when relevant, but mostly let her enjoy her meal. She seemed happy, which was all that mattered to me. After dinner, the adults lingered at the table over coffee and pie, while Clara went into the living room to play with some toys my mother had set out. That's when it happened. I had stepped into the kitchen to help my mother with dishes when I heard Teresa's voice from the dining room, slightly raised and followed by laughter. "I swear to God," she said. Watching her try to talk is like listening to a wounded animal. Does she even know she sounds like that? My hands froze in the soapy water. My mother's eyes went wide and she moved toward the dining room, but I held up a hand to stop her. I wanted to hear this. I needed to hear this. "Terry, come on," Carlos said, his voice uncomfortable, but not firm enough. Not a real objection. "What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," Teresa continued. "It's not normal. Joanna acts like everything is fine, like Clara's just quirky or special or whatever. But let's be real, the kid's disabled. She can't even hear her own voice. How is she supposed to function in the real world? And Joanna wonders why I don't have her babysit more often. I'm not letting someone who can't even use a phone watch my future children. She's not getting any future children." My mother muttered beside me, her face flushed with anger, but it was my father's response that truly broke something inside me. Instead of defending his granddaughter, instead of telling his eldest daughter that her cruelty was unacceptable, Domingo Sullivan laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a genuine belly laugh. "You're terrible, Terry," he said, still chuckling. "But you're not wrong. The kid's got problems. I told Joanna she should have tried harder with the therapy, but she gave up and just let Clara be deaf. Some parent." I walked back into the dining room with my dish towel still in my hands. 4 faces turned toward me. Teresa's defiant, Carlos's embarrassed, my father's unconcerned, and my mother's absolutely stricken as she appeared behind me. "We're leaving," I said quietly. My voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes right before an earthquake. "Oh, don't be so sensitive," Teresa said, rolling her eyes. "We're just talking. You're always so defensive about Clara. Maybe if you could take some constructive criticism, she'd be better adjusted." "Get Clara's things," I told my mother, who immediately disappeared into the living room. I turned back to my sister. "I want you to know something, Teresa. I have spent 7 years protecting my daughter from people like you. People who think she's broken. People who think her worth is determined by her ability to hear. People who are so insecure in their own sad little lives that they need to tear down a 7-year-old child to feel superior." "How dare you?" Teresa started, but I cut her off. "I'm not finished. Clara is smarter than you. She's kinder than you. She has more genuine friends than you've ever had in your life. And she will do more good in this world than you could ever dream of, despite the fact that she can't hear a single word. The only disability in this room is your complete lack of empathy and human decency." My father stood up, his face reddening. "You don't talk to your sister that way in my house. Your house, right? The one with the security cameras I installed and pay for monthly. The ones that record audio. The ones that captured every single word Teresa just said, and your response to it. Funny how that works out." Teresa's face went white. "You're recording us? I installed cameras for Mom and Dad's safety 6 months ago. But yes, they record. And yes, I can access the footage. And yes, I have every word of what you just said about my daughter saved to the cloud." I pulled out my phone and showed her the app, the playback already queued up. Technology is amazing, isn't it? You wouldn't, she whispered. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. Try me. Clara appeared then with my mother, carrying her coat and her backpack full of ornaments she never got to give out. She signed, "We're leaving, Mama?" And I nodded, signing back, "Yes, sweetie. But we'll have our own celebration at home." We left. I didn't say goodbye to my father or sister. I hugged my mother, who was crying, and told her I'd call her tomorrow. And then Clara and I drove home through the dark Portland streets, Christmas lights blinking from houses we passed, the whole world celebrating while my mind calculated revenge. The drive home was silent except for the soft hum of the heater. Clara had fallen asleep in her car seat within minutes, exhausted from the day, and blissfully unaware of what had transpired while she played with her toys. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror every few seconds, studying her peaceful face, the way her eyelashes rested against her cheeks, the slight smile that played at her lips even in sleep. She dreamed in images and colors and feelings, not sounds. Her dreams were probably more beautiful than anything the hearing world could imagine. By the time I pulled into our driveway in Southeast Portland, my hands had stopped shaking. The initial shock and hurt had crystallized into something colder, sharper, more useful. I carried Clara inside, tucked her into bed still in her Christmas dress because I couldn't bear to wake her. And then I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee that I didn't drink. I opened the security camera app and downloaded the footage from the dining room. The audio was crystal clear. My father had complained about the sensitivity when I first installed them, saying they picked up every little sound, and I had insisted that was exactly the point for security purposes. Now I was grateful for his complaint. Every word Teresa had said came through perfectly. Every laugh from my father, the casual cruelty, the mocking tone, the complete lack of awareness that what they were saying was monstrous. I watched it 3 times, detaching myself emotionally, analyzing it with the same critical eye I used at work when reviewing marketing campaigns. This wasn't just evidence of their cruelty, it was ammunition. The question was how to deploy it for maximum impact. My phone buzzed around 10 that evening. My mother. "Joanna, honey, I am so sorry. I had no idea Teresa felt that way. Your father and I had a huge fight after you left. I told him what he said was unforgivable." "What did he say?" I asked, already knowing the answer. A long pause. "He said you were overreacting, that Teresa was just blowing off steam and you took it too seriously. He said siblings say harsh things about each other's kids sometimes and it doesn't mean anything. And you?" I told him he was wrong. I told him if he couldn't see how hurtful and cruel that was, then something was broken in him. He went to bed angry, she sighed. "Teresa called me crying after you left. She's furious that you threatened her with the recording. She says you're blackmailing her." "Blackmail implies I'm asking for something in exchange for silence," I said calmly. "I haven't asked for anything. I simply informed her that her words were documented. What I choose to do with that documentation is entirely up to me." "Joanna, please. She's your sister. I know she was awful, but is ruining her life really the answer?" "She wasn't awful, Mom. She was cruel. There's a difference. Awful is forgetting someone's birthday. Cruel is mocking a disabled child and laughing about it. And she didn't just do it in private. She did it at a family gathering in front of witnesses with complete confidence that no one would challenge her. That tells me this isn't the first time. This is just the first time she's been caught." My mother was quiet for a long moment. "You're right. You're absolutely right. I don't want to lose both my daughters." "You won't lose me, Mom. But Teresa made a choice when she said those things. Choices have consequences. I'm just making sure she understands that." After we hung up, I made a list. Not a revenge fantasy list, but a practical strategic plan based on resources I actually had and actions I could realistically take. I had spent 7 years in marketing. I understood brand management, reputation control, and the power of strategic communication. Teresa's entire career was built on her reputation in Portland's wealthy circles. She positioned herself as a family-oriented, charitable, community-minded professional. Her social media was carefully curated to project warmth, success, and likability. She did volunteer work with children's charities for God's sake. The cognitive dissonance between her public persona and her private cruelty was stark. I opened my laptop and navigated to Teresa's social media profiles. Her most recent post from earlier that day showed her at my parents' house, wearing a designer sweater, holding a glass of wine, with a caption about gratitude and family bonds and the true meaning of Christmas. The comments were full of heart emojis and responses from her clients and professional connections telling her how inspiring she was. I took screenshots of everything: her charity work, her posts about family values, her partnerships with children's hospitals and youth organizations. Then I created a separate folder and organized my materials. The security camera footage, screenshots of Teresa's public persona, a timeline of events, and a list of her professional connections that I had access to through mutual acquaintances and LinkedIn. I wasn't ready to deploy anything yet, but I would be ready when the moment came. The next morning, December 26th, Clara woke up confused about why we had left Grandma and Grandpa's house so quickly. I signed to her that something had come up but that we would see Grandma soon. She accepted this easily. Children are remarkably adaptable when they trust their parents to handle things. We spent the day doing all the things we had planned to do after Christmas dinner, watching movies with captions, baking cookies, playing with her new art supplies. It was peaceful. It was exactly what both of us needed. My phone rang multiple times throughout the day. Teresa called 4 times. My father called twice. I ignored all of them. Carlos sent a text message. "Joanna, we need to talk about this situation. Teresa is very upset. Can we meet for coffee and discuss this like adults?" I deleted it without responding. My mother called in the evening, her voice tentative. "Your father wants to apologize." "Then he can apologize." "I'm listening. He wants to do it in person." "He thinks there's been a misunderstanding." "There's been no misunderstanding, Mom. I have the recording. His words are perfectly clear. If he wants to apologize, he can call me himself. But I'm not bringing Clara anywhere near him until he demonstrates that he understands exactly what he did wrong and why it was unforgivable. He's your father, Joanna. And Clara is my daughter. She comes first, always. If he can't respect that, then he's made his choice. 3 days after Christmas, Teresa showed up at my workplace. I was in the middle of a meeting with my team when the receptionist called my desk phone to tell me my sister was in the lobby and refusing to leave until she spoke with me. I excused myself from the meeting and went downstairs, finding Teresa pacing near the front desk in yoga pants and an expensive puffer jacket, her hair in a messy ponytail, her face makeup-free. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk," she said the moment she saw me. "We really don't," I replied calmly. "You need to leave my workplace. This is inappropriate." "You're being ridiculous. I came to apologize. Isn't that what you want?" "What I want is for you to never speak about my daughter that way again. What you want is for me to delete that recording so you can go back to pretending you're a good person." Her face flushed. "It was a private conversation. You had no right to record it. It was recorded by security cameras in my parents' house that they consented to. The fact that you said vile things within range of those cameras is your problem, not mine. What do you want, Joanna? Money? An apology? What will it take for you to just let this go? I don't want anything from you, Teresa. I want you to understand that your words have consequences. I want you to genuinely comprehend that what you said was wrong, but I don't think you're capable of that. You're not here because you feel bad about what you said. You're here because you're afraid of what will happen if anyone else hears it." "You're damn right I'm afraid," she hissed, glancing around at the lobby. "Do you have any idea what that recording could do to my career? To my reputation?" "Yes," I said simply. "I do. That's the point." She stared at me like she had never seen me before. "When did you become so vindictive?" "The moment you mocked my 7-year-old daughter for being deaf, and my father laughed about it. You drew the line, Teresa. I'm just making sure you understand where it is." Security had noticed the escalating conversation and approached us. I told them Teresa was leaving. She opened her mouth to argue, saw the security guard's expression, and stormed out. I watched through the glass doors as she got into her Range Rover and drove away, probably already calling Carlos to report that I was being unreasonable. That evening, I received an email from my father. The subject line was, "We need to talk about Christmas." The body of the email was 3 paragraphs of justification. He had been drinking, Teresa had been venting about her fertility struggles, and he was just trying to support her. I was taking things out of context. Clara was too young to understand anyway. So what was the harm? Families say things they don't mean sometimes. Not once did he actually apologize. Not once did he acknowledge that what he had said about his granddaughter was wrong. The email ended with, "I think you're using this situation to punish Teresa for being more successful than you. You've always been jealous of her accomplishments. It's time to let that go and move on for the sake of the family." I read the email twice. Then I forwarded it to my mother without comment. She called me 10 minutes later crying. "I didn't know he felt that way. I didn't know he was so dismissive of Clara." "Now you know," I said. "The question is what you're going to do about it." The next week brought more attempts at contact, more justifications, more demands that I be reasonable. Carlos sent flowers to my office with a card apologizing for any misunderstanding and suggesting we put this behind us for the sake of family harmony. I had the flowers donated to a nursing home. Teresa's best friend Rachel, who I barely knew, called me to say that Teresa was going through a really hard time with the fertility stuff and that I should have some compassion. I told Rachel that I had plenty of compassion for people struggling with infertility, zero compassion for people who mock disabled children, and if she was calling on Teresa's behalf, then she should know the full story before deciding whose side to take. January arrived with cold rain that turned Portland's streets into rivers. Clara went back to school after winter break, excited to see her friends and show her teacher the art supplies she had gotten for Christmas. I took her to her first day back, watching through the classroom window as she signed animatedly with her best friend Marcus about their holiday breaks. She was happy. She was thriving. She had no idea that her mother was planning to systematically dismantle her aunt's carefully constructed life. I had done my research thoroughly in those 2 weeks between Christmas and New Year's. Teresa's career was built on relationships with Portland's upper class, tech executives, doctors, lawyers, old money families with property portfolios spanning generations. She had cultivated an image of herself as not just a real estate agent, but as a trusted advisor, someone who understood family values and community responsibility. Her website featured testimonials from clients praising her integrity and her warm personality. She served on the board of 2 charitable organizations, the Portland Children's Hospital Foundation and a nonprofit that provided housing assistance to low-income families. The irony of that last one wasn't lost on me. The charity gala was scheduled for January 10th at the Sentinel Hotel downtown. It was the Portland Children's Hospital Foundation's annual fundraiser, a black tie event that drew the city's wealthiest philanthropists. Tickets were $500 each. Teresa was listed on the event website as a board member and one of the organizing committee chairs. She had posted about it extensively on social media, encouraging her followers to donate, sharing behind-the-scenes photos of the planning process, positioning herself as a passionate advocate for children's health and well-being. The cognitive dissonance was breathtaking. I bought a ticket to the gala on January 2nd. It cost me $500 I had been saving for Clara's summer camp, but some things were worth the investment. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I simply confirmed my attendance online, purchased a dress from a consignment shop that was elegant enough for the occasion, and marked the date on my calendar. The week before the gala, my mother invited me and Clara to lunch. We met at a cafe in Beaverton, neutral territory. Clara was delighted to see her grandmother, who immediately began signing with her about school and her art projects. They had a special bond that I was grateful for. My mother had never treated Clara as anything less than perfect, exactly as she was. After we ordered, my mother leaned forward, her expression serious. "Your father and I have separated." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "What?" "Temporarily. I don't know if it's permanent, but I told him he needed to leave the house until he could genuinely understand why what he said about Clara was unforgivable. He's staying with his brother in Hillsborough." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm sorry it took me this long to take a stand. I should have done it years ago. I've watched him favor Teresa over you your entire lives, and I told myself it was just his personality, that he didn't mean anything by it. But what he said about Clara, and his email to you, I can't pretend anymore that it's harmless. Mom, I never asked you to choose between us. I know, but that's exactly why I needed to. Because you wouldn't ask, even when you should, even when you deserved it." She glanced at Clara, who was happily coloring on the paper menu the restaurant had provided. "She's perfect. Anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to be in her life. That includes her grandfather." We talked for over an hour. My mother told me about the fight she and my father had after my email, how he had defended Teresa's comments as just sister rivalry, how he had accused my mother of being dramatic and taking things too seriously. She had tried to explain to him that mocking a child's disability wasn't rivalry. It was cruelty. He had dismissed her concerns, told her she was overreacting just like I was, and suggested that maybe if I had been a better parent, Clara wouldn't have problems. That was when my mother had told him to pack a bag. "Has Teresa talked to you?" I asked. My mother nodded. "She calls every day crying. She says you've ruined her life. She says you're vindictive and cruel and that she was just venting to family, and everyone says things they don't mean sometimes." She paused. I told her that's not true. I told her I've never once thought cruel things about Clara, let alone said them out loud. I told her that her words revealed something ugly inside her, and that until she could face that honestly, I didn't want to hear her excuses. How did she take that? About as well as your father took my ultimatum. She screamed at me that I was choosing you over her, that I always loved you more even though she was the successful one, that you had manipulated me with that recording. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I failed you both. I let your father create this dynamic where Teresa thought she was better than you, where competition replaced love. I'm so sorry, Joanna. You didn't fail anyone, Mom. You were working with what you had, and you're making it right now. Clara looked up from her coloring, noticing her grandmother's tears. She signed, "Why sad?" And my mother pulled her into a hug, signing back, "Happy tears, because I love you so much." The day before the gala, I did something I had never done before. I scheduled a consultation with an attorney who specialized in family law and harassment cases. His name was Francisco Alves, and his office was in a modest building near Pioneer Square. I brought my laptop with the security footage, my phone with all the text messages and voicemails Teresa and my father had left, copies of the email my father sent, and documentation of Teresa showing up at my workplace. Attorney Alves watched the security footage once, his expression carefully neutral. When it finished, he leaned back in his chair. "This is pretty damning. What are you planning to do with it?" "I'm considering my options. I wanted to understand the legal implications first." Oregon is a one-party consent state for recordings in private locations with the permission of the property owner. Your parents own the house, they consented to the security system, so the recording is legal. You wouldn't face any criminal liability for possessing it or even sharing it as long as you're not using it for extortion or blackmail. He paused. But there are other considerations. If you release this publicly and it damages your sister's reputation or career, she could potentially sue you for defamation or intentional infliction of emotional distress. Even though everything on the recording is true, even though those are her actual words, truth is a defense against defamation, yes. But she could argue that you're selectively editing or taking things out of context, that your release of the video was malicious in intent, that the damage to her reputation and career exceeds any legitimate purpose you might have for sharing it. He leaned forward. I'm not saying she'd win. Based on what I've seen, she probably wouldn't. But she could make your life expensive and difficult for a while. What if I'm not the one who releases it? What if someone else happens to see it and shares it? Attorney Alves gave me a look that suggested he knew exactly where I was going. That's a gray area. If you can demonstrate that you didn't intentionally distribute it to that person for the purpose of having them share it, then you have plausible deniability. But courts aren't stupid. If there's a clear chain of events showing you orchestrated the release, you could still be held liable. I thanked him for his time and paid his consultation fee. I left his office with a clearer understanding of the risks and boundaries. I wasn't afraid of Teresa suing me. Let her try to explain in court why she thought mocking a deaf child was acceptable. Let her stand in front of a judge and justify those words. But I also understood that I needed to be smart about how this unfolded. That evening, I tried on my dress for the gala. It was a deep navy blue, simple but elegant, with a high neckline and 3/4 sleeves. I looked professional, composed, appropriate. I looked like someone who belonged at a charity event supporting children's health care. I practiced my smile in the mirror, warm but not overly friendly, confident but not aggressive. I needed to blend in, to be forgettable, until I decided to be memorable. Clara knocked on my bedroom door, and I let her in. She looked at me in the dress and signed, "Pretty. Where going?" "A work event," I signed back, which wasn't entirely a lie. This was work, just not the kind I got paid for. "Can I come?" "Not this time, sweetie. But Grandma is going to stay with you and you can have a movie night together." She seemed satisfied with this. My mother had agreed to babysit without asking questions about where I was going, though I suspected she had her suspicions. Before she arrived, I sat Clara down on the couch and pulled out my phone. "I want to show you something," I signed. "But first I need to ask you a question. Do you remember Christmas at Grandma and Grandpa's house?" She nodded enthusiastically. "Fun! Cookies! Did anyone there make you feel bad? Did anyone do anything that made you sad?" Her expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. She shrugged. "Grandpa doesn't sign much. Makes me confused sometimes. Anyone else?" Another shrug. "Aunt Teresa looks at me funny sometimes, but lots of people do. I'm used to it." My heart broke a little. She was used to it. At 7 years old, my daughter was already accustomed to people looking at her like she was different, deficient, worthy of pity or disdain. I pulled her close. "You know you're perfect exactly as you are. right? Being deaf doesn't make you less than anyone else. I know, Mama. You tell me all the time. She smiled and signed. You worry too much. Maybe I did. Or maybe I worried exactly the right amount in a world that was often cruel to people who didn't fit its narrow definitions of normal. The Sentinel Hotel was lit up like a jewel box when I arrived at 7 on the evening of January 10th. Valets took cars at the entrance while guests in evening wear streamed through the doors into the ornate lobby. I had taken an Uber, not wanting to deal with parking or risk having wine with dinner and driving. I needed to be sharp tonight, fully present, ready to execute. The gala was being held in the hotel's grand ballroom, a space that dripped with old Portland elegance, crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, gilt molding on the walls. Round tables covered in white linens filled the room, each centerpiece an elaborate arrangement of white roses and candles. A stage at the far end held a podium and a large projection screen. Classical music played softly through hidden speakers, as guests mingled with champagne flutes and made polite conversation about property values and vacation homes. I checked in at the registration table, received my table assignment, and entered the ballroom. I had been assigned to table 17, which was positioned on the left side of the room with a decent view of the stage. I wasn't at one of the premium tables near the front. Those were reserved for major donors and board members, but I wasn't relegated to the back either. Perfect. Visible but not conspicuous. I spotted Teresa almost immediately. She stood near the front of the room in a stunning emerald green gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair swept up in an elegant chignon, diamond earrings catching the light. She was laughing at something a silver-haired man in a tuxedo was saying, her hand resting lightly on his arm, in that practiced way she had of making everyone feel like the most important person in the room. Carlos stood beside her in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking the part of the successful husband. They were the picture of success, philanthropy, community leadership. I found my table and introduced myself to my table mates, a cardiologist and his wife, an attorney who specialized in healthcare law, a woman who ran a medical supply company, and 2 others who worked in hospital administration. They were pleasant people, genuinely invested in the cause, asking thoughtful questions about each other's work in connection to the hospital. I told them I was a marketing coordinator and that I had a daughter who benefited from the hospital's specialized care services. This was true, though Clara's care was through her school's partnership with various specialists, rather than through this particular hospital. They didn't need the specifics. Dinner was served at 7:30, salmon with asparagus and wild rice, followed by a chocolate mousse that was probably delicious, though I barely tasted it. I made polite conversation with the cardiologist about his research while keeping Teresa in my peripheral vision. She moved from table to table during dinner, greeting donors, thanking people for coming, playing the gracious host. She never looked in my direction. Why would she? I was nobody in her world, just another anonymous donor she hadn't bothered to identify. At 8:30, the program began. The hospital's CEO gave a speech about the vital work being done, the children's lives being saved, the cutting-edge research being funded by generous donors like everyone in this room. Then several board members came to the podium to share their personal connections to the hospital's mission. Teresa was scheduled to speak fourth, after the CEO, the board president, and a grateful parent whose premature twins had survived thanks to the neonatal intensive care unit. I waited through the first 3 speeches, my phone in my lap under the table, my thumb hovering over the camera app. I had already queued up the security footage, already tested that it would play smoothly, already confirmed that my phone could connect to the hotel's Wi-Fi network. I had checked the ballroom's audio-visual setup earlier by claiming I needed to use the restroom and wandering past the tech booth. The system was controlled by a laptop on a table beside the stage, operated by a young man in black pants and a black polo shirt who looked like he was probably a college student earning extra money. The projection screen could display content from multiple sources, including wireless devices connected to the room's network. Teresa stepped up to the podium at 8:45. She adjusted the microphone, smiled warmly at the room, and began her speech. Good evening, everyone. I'm Teresa Sullivan Mendez, and I'm honored to serve on the board of the Portland Children's Hospital Foundation. For me, this work is deeply personal. I believe that every child deserves the chance to thrive, to reach their full potential, to be supported by a community that sees their worth and invests in their future. The irony was staggering. I pulled out my phone. As many of you know, my husband Carlos and I are hoping to start our own family soon, Teresa continued, her voice taking on a slightly vulnerable quality. And knowing that we have a world-class children's hospital right here in our city gives us such peace of mind. Every child is precious. Every child deserves our protection and advocacy. I opened the camera app and connected to the room's Wi-Fi network. The tech booth laptop was visible as an available screen-sharing option. They had left it open for presenters who wanted to display content from their phones or tablets. Sloppy security, but convenient for my purposes. The work we do here tonight, the funds we raise, they don't just support medical treatment. They support families, they support hope. They tell children who are facing unimaginable challenges that they are valued, that they are loved, that they matter. I selected the tech booth laptop and pressed share screen. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the large projection screen behind Teresa flickered. Her PowerPoint presentation of smiling children and hospital statistics disappeared. The screen went dark for a beat, and then the security footage from my parents' dining room on Christmas Day filled it. The audio came through the ballroom's speaker system, Teresa's recorded voice echoing through the space with perfect clarity. I swear to God, watching her try to talk is like listening to a wounded animal. Ah, oh, does she even know she sounds like that? Teresa froze at the podium, her mouth still open from whatever word she had been about to speak. The room went absolutely silent. Every head turned from the stage to the projection screen. What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, the recording continued. It's not normal. Joanna acts like everything is fine, like Clara's just quirky or special or whatever, but let's be real. The kid's disabled. She can't even hear her own voice. Someone gasped. The tech booth operator was frantically typing on his laptop, trying to regain control of the screen. But I had locked the sharing connection, and it would take him at least 30 seconds to override it. On screen, my father's voice boomed through the speakers, followed by his laughter. You're terrible, Terry. But you're not wrong. The kid's got problems. I told Joanna she should have tried harder with the therapy, but she gave up and just let Clara be deaf. Some parent. Teresa spun around to look at the screen behind her, her face draining of all color. Carlos had stood up from his table near the front, his expression horrified. Around the ballroom, the expressions ranged from shock to disgust to confusion. The tech operator finally managed to cut the connection and the screen went dark. But the damage was done. That's not... Teresa stammered into the microphone, but she had no words. What could she possibly say? The tech operator brought her PowerPoint back up, but it didn't matter. No one was looking at the screen of smiling children anymore. Everyone was looking at Teresa, whose carefully constructed mask of philanthropic concern had just been ripped away to reveal something ugly underneath. I stood up from my table, drawing attention as I began walking toward the exit. Several people noticed me moving, saw my expression, calm, composed, satisfied. An understanding began to dawn on some faces. The cardiologist from my table whispered, was that woman talking about your daughter? I paused at the ballroom doors and turned back. Teresa was still at the podium, frozen, while board members rushed toward the stage. Our eyes met across the room. I smiled at her. Not a cruel smile. Just a simple, genuine smile. And then I walked out. The lobby of the Sentinel Hotel was still busy with late arrivals to other events and hotel guests coming and going. I walked through it without hurrying, found a chair near the window overlooking Broadway, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. The ballroom doors burst open 8 minutes after I left. Teresa came storming out, Carlos close behind her, followed by 3 board members who looked like they were trying to have a conversation she wasn't interested in hearing. Her face was blotchy, her perfect composure shattered, mascara starting to smudge under her eyes. She spotted me in my chair by the window and changed direction, marching toward me with fury radiating from every line of her body. You! She hissed. You did this. You stood up right when you connected your phone. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're talking about, I said calmly. I left because I felt ill. Something about the salmon didn't agree with me. Don't you dare. You played that recording. You deliberately humiliated me in front of... She broke off, becoming aware of the curious looks she was attracting from people in the lobby. She lowered her voice but lost none of her venom. You just destroyed my career. You just ruined my reputation. For what? Because I made one comment about your daughter? You mocked a deaf 7-year-old child for the way she sounds when she tries to speak, I said quietly. You called her disabled like it was an insult. You suggested she shouldn't exist because she doesn't meet your standards of normal. And my father laughed. That wasn't one comment, Teresa. That was cruelty. That was you revealing who you really are when you think no one important is watching. Carlos reached us then, putting his hand on Teresa's arm. Let's go. This isn't the place. No, she doesn't get to do this. Teresa yanked her arm away from him. She doesn't get to play the victim here. She recorded a private conversation and weaponized it. She planned this. She bought a ticket to the gala specifically to sabotage me. I bought a ticket to support children's health care, I said, which is more than I can say for you. You're a board member for a children's hospital foundation while mocking disabled children in private. The hypocrisy is breathtaking. One of the board members, an older woman with short silver hair wearing a burgundy gown, approached us. Mrs. Mendez, I think we need to have a conversation about your continued role with the foundation. No, Teresa said desperately, turning to face her. No, this was taken out of context. My sister has been... We've had family issues, and she's trying to punish me for... There is no context in which what you said is acceptable, the woman said firmly. You serve on a board dedicated to children's well-being. You just publicly revealed that you hold deeply troubling views about disabled children. That's not a family issue. That's a values issue. We'll be in touch about next steps, but I think you should plan on resigning from the board. Teresa's face crumpled. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered Clara signing, Aunt Teresa looks at me funny sometimes, with that resigned acceptance that 7-year-olds shouldn't have to feel. You're enjoying this, Teresa whispered, looking at me with something like wonder. You're actually enjoying watching my life fall apart. I'm not enjoying anything, I said. I'm simply ensuring that your actions have consequences. You chose to say those things. You chose to mock my daughter. You chose to do it with complete confidence that nothing would happen to you. You were wrong. Over the next hour, sitting in that hotel lobby, I watched the fallout begin. Several people who had been at the gala came through the lobby, some in pairs or small groups, clearly discussing what they had witnessed. I overheard fragments of conversation. Can't believe she would say something like that. And she works with children's charities. Who knows what else she said? My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Your father called. Someone forwarded him a video from the gala. He's beside himself. He wants to know if you're the one who played it. I told him to leave you alone. I texted back. I attended a charity event. What happened there was beyond my control. Technically true. Once I pressed play, I had no control over how people would react. Another text came through, this one from Rachel, Teresa's best friend. What you did tonight was unforgivable. Teresa is devastated. You've always been jealous of her success, and now you've shown your true colors. You're a vindictive, cruel person who used her disabled daughter as a weapon. I hope you're proud of yourself. I blocked her number without responding. People would believe what they wanted to believe. Some would see me as vindictive. Others would see me as a mother protecting her daughter. I was fine with either interpretation, as long as Teresa faced real consequences. The real consequences came faster than I anticipated. By the time I got home that night, my mother had stayed to put Clara to bed and fallen asleep on my couch. My phone was full of notifications. Someone at the gala had recorded the incident on their phone and posted it to social media. The video was grainy and the audio wasn't perfect, but it showed the projection screen behind Teresa with the security footage playing, showed her frozen horror, showed the room's reaction. It had been shared hundreds of times already, with comments ranging from disgust at Teresa's words to debates about the ethics of public shaming. By morning, the story had been picked up by 2 local news outlets. Portland real estate agent caught mocking disabled child at charity gala, read one headline. The other was more direct. Children's Hospital Board member resigns after video reveals cruel comments about deaf child. Teresa had resigned, or been forced to resign. Either way, her name was being scrubbed from the foundation's website, her bio removed, her photo taken down from the board member page. Her real estate agency, she was a partner in a boutique firm that catered to luxury properties, had issued a statement saying they were reviewing the situation and that her comments do not reflect the values of our organization. Carlos called me at 9 in the morning. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. What do you want, Carlos? Teresa is in bed, refusing to get up. She hasn't eaten since last night. She's getting death threats on social media. People are leaving 1-star reviews on her business page, calling her every name you can imagine. Her professional reputation is destroyed. His voice was tight. Are you satisfied? I didn't post that video on social media, I said. Someone at the gala did. Once something happens in front of 200 people, you can't control how they respond. You orchestrated this. You planned the whole thing. I attended a charity event. What happened beyond that was a natural consequence of Teresa's own words being heard by people she depends on for her career. If she's upset, maybe she should reflect on why what she said was so damaging when exposed to public scrutiny. She's talking about suing you. For what? I didn't defame her. I didn't lie about her. Her own words spoken in her own voice caused this. Truth is a defense against defamation, Carlos. She'd know that if she bothered to consult a decent attorney instead of just threatening legal action she can't follow through on. He was quiet for a long moment. You know, I always thought you were the reasonable sister, the mature one. But this is cruel, Joanna. You destroyed her on purpose. She destroyed herself the moment she chose to mock my daughter. I just made sure the consequences caught up with her. If you want to be mad at someone, be mad at your wife for being the kind of person who says those things. I hung up. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from guilt, from satisfaction, from the clean, sharp feeling of justice executed perfectly. 3 weeks after the gala, I sat in a booth at a coffee shop in Northwest Portland, meeting with attorney Francisco Alves. He had called me to request the meeting, saying there had been developments I should know about. I left Clara with my mother and drove downtown, curious about what could have happened that required an in-person conversation. Alves slid a folder across the table to me. Teresa did consult an attorney. They sent me a preliminary demand letter threatening to sue you for intentional infliction of emotional distress, invasion of privacy, and damage to her professional reputation. My stomach tightened. Can she do that? She can file anything she wants. Winning is another matter. He opened the folder and showed me the letter, which was filled with legal language about malicious intent and calculated harm and public humiliation. Her attorney is smart enough to know this case would be difficult to win, but not smart enough to talk his client out of pursuing it. My guess is she's paying him to indulge her need to fight back, even if the fight is pointless. What do I need to do? Nothing yet. I sent a response letter explaining that her own words created the damage, that the recording was legal, that you didn't distribute it yourself, and that truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims. I also pointed out that if she proceeds with litigation, the entire situation will be relitigated in public during discovery and trial, which will only amplify the damage to her reputation. He smiled slightly. Most importantly, I reminded her attorney that Clara could be called as a witness to testify about how her aunt's comments made her feel, and that putting a deaf child on the stand to defend against claims that mocking her wasn't harmful would be terrible optics for his client. Will they drop it? I'd bet money on it. Teresa wants vindication, but she's not stupid enough to put herself through a trial that would keep this story in the news cycle for months. Her attorney will eventually convince her that the best thing she can do is let this fade from public consciousness, which it will. Internet outrage is a fire that burns hot and fast. In 6 months, most people won't remember her name, but they would remember what she said. And that was enough. I left Alves's office and drove to Clara's school to pick her up early. I had taken the afternoon off work to take her to a new exhibit at the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. She had been begging to see it for weeks. Something about a special display on color theory and light. When I signed to her that we were going, her face lit up with pure joy. She grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the car, already signing rapid-fire questions about what we would see. At the museum, we spent 3 hours exploring exhibits. Clara was fascinated by a display that showed how different animals perceive color differently than humans, and by an interactive station where she could mix colored lights to create new shades. She signed to every museum staff member we encountered, completely unself-conscious about the fact that most of them didn't understand ASL and had to rely on me to interpret. She didn't care. She existed fully in her own experience, confident in her communication, expecting the world to meet her where she was. That night, after Clara was asleep, I finally allowed myself to check the social media response to the gala incident. The initial viral video had been viewed over 500,000 times. The comments were brutal. People were disgusted by Teresa's words, by the hypocrisy of her board position, by the cruelty toward a child. Some comments were thoughtful discussions about ableism and the way society treats disabled people. Others were simple expressions of outrage. A few were defensive of Teresa, claiming the recording was taken out of context, or that everyone says things they don't mean in private. But those were overwhelmingly shouted down. Teresa's real estate firm had announced 3 days after the gala that she was no longer affiliated with the organization. Her partnership had been dissolved. Her professional social media accounts had been deleted. Her personal accounts were set to private. She had essentially disappeared from public life. My father had sent one email in the 3 weeks since the gala. I hope you're happy. Your sister's career is destroyed. Her marriage is strained. and she's being harassed by strangers. All because you couldn't let go of one comment. This is vindictive and unforgivable. You've torn this family apart. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say to someone who still believed Teresa's cruelty was one comment, and my reaction was the real problem. My mother, however, had made her position clear. She filed for legal separation from my father 2 weeks after the gala, citing irreconcilable differences. When I asked her if the gala incident had been the final straw, she shook her head. The gala was just confirmation. The final straw was realizing he cared more about protecting Teresa's reputation than protecting Clara's heart. I can't be married to someone with such warped priorities. She had moved into a small apartment in Beaverton, started attending a support group for people leaving long-term marriages, and had been spending time with Clara 3 times a week. She was happier than I had seen her in years, lighter somehow, as if ending that marriage had lifted a weight she had been carrying for decades. As for Clara, she remained blissfully unaware of the specific details of what had happened at the gala. She knew that Aunt Teresa had said something mean, and that's why we weren't seeing her anymore. She knew that Grandpa had been unkind, and that's why Grandma was living separately from him now. But she didn't know the specifics of their words, didn't carry the burden of knowing exactly how they had mocked her. I would tell her someday when she was older and could process it. For now, I protected her from that particular pain. 6 weeks after the gala, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. The return address was Teresa's, though she had moved from the West Hills house to an apartment I didn't recognize. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity won out. The letter was 2 pages. Teresa's handwriting slightly less perfect than usual, as if written in an emotional state. Joanna, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. What I said about Clara was inexcusable. I was cruel. I was projecting my own pain about not being able to have children onto your situation. And I convinced myself that pointing out Clara's disability somehow made my infertility less painful by comparison. It doesn't. It just made me a person I don't recognize. Carlos and I are in marriage counseling. My career is over. I've lost friendships, professional connections, and the respect of people I've known for years. I've been forced to confront the fact that I built my entire identity on being successful and admired, and when that was taken away, I had nothing left. I was hollow. I'm not writing to ask for your forgiveness or to minimize what I did. I'm writing because you deserve to know that I understand why you did what you did. You protected your daughter. You showed her that her worth is non-negotiable, that anyone who disrespects her will face consequences. That's good parenting. I hope someday, if I ever have children of my own, I can love them as fiercely as you love Clara. I'm sorry. For everything. For not being the sister you deserved. For not being the aunt Clara deserved. For all of it. Teresa. I read the letter 3 times. It was the first time Teresa had acknowledged the core issue. Not that she got caught. Not that she was embarrassed. But that what she said was fundamentally wrong. It was the first hint of genuine remorse I had seen from her. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't respond. Maybe I would someday. Maybe I wouldn't. The apology was for her benefit more than mine. It didn't change what had happened. It didn't erase her words. But it was something. 4 months after the gala, life had settled into a new normal. Clara was thriving in school, had been invited to submit her artwork to a regional competition for young deaf artists, and had made 2 new friends in her class. My mother was happier than I had ever seen her, dating someone she met at her book club, planning a trip to visit her sister in California. My father had moved to Hillsborough permanently, living with his brother, stubbornly maintaining that everyone had overreacted and refusing to admit any wrongdoing. I hadn't spoken to him since Christmas. Teresa had taken a job at a nonprofit that worked with low-income families to find affordable housing. It was a massive step down from her previous position, both in prestige and salary. I only knew because my mother mentioned it, saying Teresa seemed to be genuinely trying to rebuild her life with more authentic values. Whether that was true or just another performance remained to be seen. As for me, I got a promotion at work, senior marketing manager, with a significant raise that meant I could put more money toward Clara's future. I started dating someone I met through a friend, a teacher at a school for the deaf who signed fluently and thought Clara was amazing. We were taking things slow, but it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in a long time. The video from the gala eventually stopped circulating. The news cycle moved on to other stories. Teresa's name faded from public consciousness, but for the people who mattered, the board members of children's charities, the real estate professionals in Portland's luxury market, the wealthy clients she had cultivated, the memory lingered. She would never fully rebuild what she had lost. And that was exactly as it should be. One evening in late May, I tucked Clara into bed after reading her favorite book. She signed to me, "Mama, are you happy?" "Very happy," I signed back. "Why do you ask? You smile more now, since Christmas. Out of the mouths of children, or in this case, from the hands of children." She was right. I did smile more. Not because I took pleasure in Teresa's downfall, but because I had proven something important to my daughter without her even knowing it, that her mother would fight for her always, that her worth was absolute and non-negotiable, that anyone who tried to diminish her would face consequences. "I smile because I have you," I signed to Clara. "And you make everything better," she grinned and signed. "I know, I'm pretty great." Yes, she was. And anyone who couldn't see that deserved everything they got.